This is Willis Trueblood Jr., and this is his sentencing hearing. Today, he will find out whether his gamble paid off. Willis is the young man who ran over and killed a Florida State University student, Ellie Sims. However, he was not charged with causing Ellie's death, even though he was speeding and struck her while she was actively crossing in a designated pedestrian crosswalk with the flashing lights activated. Instead, he was charged with leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Last month, in January of this year, Willis entered what is known as an open plea. This means that he admitted to the charge without a negotiated deal and basically left the sentencing decision entirely up to the court. We have covered this case extensively here on Deep Dive True Crime, including the body camera footage from the scene, and we also have Willis Trueblood's interrogation video. Judge J. Lee Marsh will decide the sentence. He will hear from the state, from the victim's family through impact statements, and from the defense, including possibly statements of support for Willis and other mitigating evidence. The state previously offered a plea deal that included a sentencing range, a minimum and a maximum sentence the court would impose under that agreement, but Willis rejected that offer. Instead, even though the sentencing guidelines recommended a minimum sentence that is higher than the maximum sentence he could have received under that rejected deal, Willis is taking a gamble. His attorney, public defender Jessica Yuri, will attempt to present enough mitigating evidence to persuade the court to impose a sentence below the recommended minimum under the guidelines. The defense will likely focus on his age at the time of the offense. He was very young, and they will also focus on his fear after realizing he had run over and likely killed Ellie. They may argue that he had believed others had witnessed the crash and would have called for help. They will also likely present additional evidence in support of a downward departure from the sentencing guidelines. Some of the factors the court may be asked to consider include a legitimate, uncoerced acceptance of responsibility, cooperation with the state, whether the offense was unsophisticated or isolated, and whether the defendant has shown remorse. Whether the defendant was too young to fully appreciate the consequences of his actions. Here we go.
Right, depends what is the state's argument that the court should consider it solely for purposes of remorse and not any criminal action based on the defense's motion for Delaware departure.
Sure, Judge. We'll have evidence of remorse, but I still think there's authentication. I don't see any evidence that this was actually his incident.
All right, state court taking matter under advisement.
Nothing further from the state.
All right, next, detention.
Your Honor, Jessica Erie and Randall Harper on behalf of Willis Trueblood and his family. Judge, before we even start with evidence, Your Honor, I want to make something very clear that Mr. Trueblood himself and his mother have asked me to relay to this court and to the Sentis family. Judges, the court is well aware there has been a no contact order during the duration of this case. Willis, his family, everyone that is here in support of him is legally prohibited from reaching out to them, from acknowledging their loss, the gravity of their loss, or from sending any condolences. Before we start with evidence, Judge, we wanted to make very clear that Willis Trueblood Jr. and his family extends their deepest condolences and sorrow for the loss of Ellie Sims. Their heart breaks for their family, and since this case has been pending, Judge, they have done nothing but think about them and keep them in their thoughts and prayers, Your Honor. I have been thinking about their loss and the gravity that they are dealing with. So respectfully, Judge, before we even started, we wanted to acknowledge them and also make clear, Judge, that they've been prohibited from reaching out, which is why we are where we are now. Judge, first, Your Honor, the defense will call Sergeant Cappleman with TPD.
You swear to affirm the testimony you give in the case now and here.
Judge, permission to move the podium a little bit.
You may.
Good afternoon, Sergeant Cappleman. Can you please stay and spell your name for the record?
Sergeant Cappleman, spelled C-A-P-P-L-A-N.
Sergeant Cappleman, how are you currently employed?
Supervisor of the traffic unit at the Dallas Police Department.
How long have you been in that role?
In that role since the end of 2021.
I want to direct your attention back to an accident that your unit investigated on FSU campus. Have you had an opportunity to review the investigative report in this case?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Was that report actually conducted by Detective Harris, but you signed off in a supervisory capacity?
That's correct.
Can you please describe to Judge Marsh the area where this accident occurred?
The area of Pensacola on Lorene Street is in proximity to FSU campus. Pensacola Street is a westbound roadway. Lorene Street travels north and south.
And are you aware of the speed limits on those roads respectively?
Yes.
Can you tell the court, please?
At the time of this incident, the speed limit on Pensacola Street was 30 miles per hour. It is today 25 miles per hour. Lorene Street was 25 miles per hour at the time of this incident. It is still 25 miles per hour.
And Sergeant Cappleman, are you aware of the approximate time that the accident happened?
Yes.
What was that?
Approximately 6:40 p.m.
And were there people at that time that began calling 911?
That's correct.
Sergeant Cappleman, are you aware of video cameras and surveillance cameras in the area of that intersection or around campus there?
Time of the incident, yes.
Okay, and what were those?
We searched the entire area for any video surveillance that we could find. There are several buildings that had cameras on them that did not have video recordings or didn't have hard drives where the cameras didn't work. There was a video that was obtained from Southgate down the road from where the incident occurred, and that did have video of the vehicle prior to the crash.
The vehicle, is that the vehicle being driven by Willis Trueblood Jr.?
Yes.
And at that time, what can you tell us about the speed?
The speed of the vehicle on the video,
Yes.
or what do you mean?
On the Southgate campus video.
From the Southgate campus video, observing traffic on that video, and then seeing the suspect's vehicle, we could see it as we attempted to do reconstructions to try to get a speed, an exact speed of the vehicle. The speed was consistent with between 37 and 44 miles per hour.
And at that time, from that surveillance, was the rate of speed consistent with the surrounding vehicle?
Yes.
And so based on what your unit used as industry standards and mathematical equations, speed at the time of accident, what is your estimate for that speed?
At the time of the accident,
Yes.
I can tell you prior to the accident, the 37 to 44 would be the range based on the video evidence that we had. It was consistent with other traffic in the area as well. And at the time of the crash itself, based on the evidence of the crash scene, I can't give you an exact speed on that. There's not enough evidence to give you something exact on it.
Ultimately, in the scope of your investigation, do you learn that Willis Trueblood Jr. leaves the scene of the accident?
Yes.
And then ultimately, do you learn that he surrenders himself to the Tallahassee Police Department within about an hour after that?
As far as the time goes, I would have to look at the cab, but it was within pretty close proximity to when the accident occurred.
Any further questions?
Cross-examination.
So your best estimate is that Mr. Trueblood was traveling between 7 and 14 miles over the speed limit.
Based on the mathematical equations from the video at Southgate campus. That's correct.
And what is a safe speed to travel through a pedestrian crosswalk when the lights are flashing?
Through a pedestrian crosswalk, you should be stopped before pedestrian crosswalk if the lights are flashing.
Are we ready?
No, judges, witness review.
You sit down.
Your Honor, at this point, the defense would publish 3 body-worn clips of the responding officers to the area in which Mr. Trueblood Jr. was arrested. What you'll learn in these clips, Judge, is after the accident, Mr. Trueblood goes to a friend's house. It's on Liberty and Holton. And there are 3 different Tallahassee police officers that respond to that area and where he's taken into custody. It's the same video of the arrest, but from 3 different angles, Judge, that will play for you. If you can see that up, Mr.
How are these marked?
Sure, Judge, their defense exhibits would be 5, Your Honor.
I don't have any objection to Your Honor reviewing those, Judge, but if they do show the deceased, I would ask that they only be published to Your Honor.
They do not, Your Honor, and what I also wanted to let the court know is the car is there. This is the arrest of Mr. Trueblood. It's a completely different location, Judge, but you can see the car.
Understood. No objection.
This is defense exhibit 5, right?
Yes.
All right, without objection.
Judge, just as a reminder, Your Honor, the first 30 seconds of every one of these clips, there is no audio, and then after the first 30, you're
And I know you know this, I know this, but so that the record is aware, the court understands how these work, is that it's recording video consistently, and it's when it's activated, the audio starts recording automatically, and it keeps those 30 seconds of video that were already in.
Yes, sir.
Y'all just call us. I'm gonna let you know. You alright with that? Not yet. Someone's gonna talk to you. How's we do this handcuffs on? Yeah, we're just gonna set in here and get her.
Let's give it to him. We just have it, right?
I know, but he's petty and he's scared. Okay.
It's okay.
So we will wait on the police officer to come. He said,
Just call us.
yeah, he said, well, we will track somebody down, so that's what. So. Y'all want me to?
We're not questioning right now, that would be us.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be investigated.
So we're like,
TBD. Yeah, you saw the whole investigation. Yeah, I don't know what it's.
okay.
Copy the station.
Is that? So. You petty and you scared, you already
So they thought this was just confirming Charlie Foxtrot 5 6 Kilo Papa. Good Nissan Sentra.
So where y'all gonna take it?
We still have the whole investigation.
We're just gonna an investigator.
Judge, what I think is important for the court to know in those clips of the body worn camera first is the time, Judge. So it's 1940 on the officer's camera, so they are responding at 7:40, which is within an hour of when this accident occurred. What you can see is Willis Trueblood Jr. standing there with his mother, Letitia Williams, who you'll hear from shortly, as they walk out to law enforcement. You also see his uncle in the yellow tank top, who was bringing law enforcement to him as well with TPD. You'll learn when they testify shortly that they had called law enforcement and that they were told they could help flag somebody down, which is what they're doing, Judge, on that camera. You see Mr. Jr. there Mr. Trueblood Jr. willingly walking out to the police, being cooperative, surrendering himself to them, Judge, and being cooperative with the arrest. And I think that's all important for him to know. Additionally, Judge, is you hear the officers acknowledge that he looks scared, that they can see he's scared as they're standing there, and they acknowledge that to his mom when he's walking out to be arrested. And I think that's all important for the court to consider. Next, Judge, the defense will call Detective Robert Adams.
recording testimony you give in the case now here. Truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. As you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Detective, could you please say and spell your name for the record?
Yes, Detective Robert Adams, ROBERTADAMS,
How are you currently employed?
with the Tallahassee Police Department in the traffic homicide.
How long have you been with that position?
Approximately 12 years.
And were you involved in the investigation and the questioning of Willis Trueblood Jr. in this case? Judge, the defense would move, I have it all on the same CD, Judge, but it's defense 5 for identification, the interrogation. I intend to play it first, Judge, and then ask Detective Adams some questions.
No objection.
Judge, for the first 20 or so minutes, Mr. Trueblood Jr. is sitting in the room by himself until the detectives come in there to question him. And so with permission, Judge, I'll fast forward to that portion. Judge, I would also ask the court for the record to take point of the time, it's 2034, which is 8:34. So this is almost within 2 hours of the accident. Judge, one last thing, there is a portion, portion that I've asked Mr. Willis to review, it's just the family. Also, judges, some portions are difficult to clear. I did have a transcript prepared if I'm being patient. Yeah, but I should judge. Judge, I can have it.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you give in the case now here is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. All right, Mr. Chairman, now Mr. Uri, you proceed.
You just tell the judge what you want to see.
First, I just want to say, condolences to the family. The victim is not even feasible to think how they go through day after day. Would have to deal with loss of a loved one. I just want,
I was gonna wait to the end. They're gonna want your name.
John Hogan. Sometimes, growing up, you don't have a clear idea of what your future has for you. You don't know trials, the tribulations, the stuff you're gonna deal with. But when you face them, you learn from them. You grow from them. I don't have any clue how he's gonna be able to move forward from this. this is gonna be a tragedy that he has to live with. You know, if you hurt someone, you can go back and apologize. Like, if you take from someone, you can hopefully give it back and hopefully forgiveness. There's no way you can make up for taking a life. There's nothing you can do to that person's loved ones to give them that hope of seeing that person again. I wish I would have done better to instruct what it means to operate a vehicle, to know the responsibilities that comes with it, so that certain things just don't have to be a part of your life. Just hearing him say the sun within his eyes, I know I never talked to him about that, and that don't eat me up. I never taught him about that is when you slow down. You can't see. Don't push the gas. Slow down. Please allow for his lack of knowledge to weigh into the whole situation. One time we went out to eat for his sister's birthdays at a hibachi restaurant. And you know, when you go to a hibachi, it's a good time. You're going to have a great time. The guys going to entertain you and they do the jokes and stuff. I looked over at Willis when the guy was doing the jokes on his sister and his mother, and I saw he was getting agitated, aggravated about it. And I talked to him later about it, and he was like, yeah, he was trying to be funny. I was like, no, Willis, that's his job. He's there to entertain the whole audience. He's the whole show. And it didn't even hit me that he didn't have that understanding of that. We do landscaping. I'm a landscaper. So every day I get up and service others. Willis also comes with me to help me out. One day after I was doing something, I was like, hey, I need you to move the truck for me so we can get this thing done. It was like, oh, John, I can't move the truck. Like, why? He said, that's a part of the thing I'm dealing with. I can't operate vehicles. I was like, yeah, move the truck. It was like, I can't. I gotta set a good example for my younger brother. And it hit me so hard, it'd be like, I don't know if I ever even thought about it. He looked at it like that. So he has to be an example. He was told not to do something, and that he cannot do. And from that, he said, that is an example I want to set up my own. I just wish I would have told him. Don't leave. Don't leave. Please don't leave. You talk to the children about, hey, you shouldn't speed, you shouldn't do this, but you don't tell them about that afterwards when the stuff happens. How to react after. He has to be held accountable for the actions. I just ask for leniency for not knowing and not understanding. how horrible things have come.
You would please raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you give the case now hearing shall be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. I'm Pastor Stan Manton of Spirit and Truth Outreach Ministries. I'm Willis pastor now for about maybe 10, 15 years. I don't know. I've known him when he was a little kid, maybe 10, 11, maybe years old, and I watched him grow up. And you know, I've heard some things, you know, and today that would have never even crossed my mind. It's, you know, things like drug use or drug dealer and stuff like, no, that would never him. He's always been in a sheltered environment. When I say sheltered environment, his mother kept him and his siblings, I mean, in her watch at all times. Even when we had church events, if she couldn't be there, they couldn't be there. And that's the way they grew up. They grew up always at home, doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, I always used to compliment on how well mannered her kids were. Always. I mean, never any problems with them. I never had to counsel him about anything. As a matter of fact, he even helped me build a home for mentally and physically disabled. And he never complained, and whatever I asked him to do, he would do it. And you know, I always though know that there was a slight edge of just, I say, and I don't mean it in a bad way, just the common sense to do things. You know, I mean, he would understand in his capacity, but not in the whole sense of how it should be, you know, and he always meant well. He grew up to work hard and got him a little job, and next thing I know, hey, just like any other kid, he was driving. And he wasn't like he had a lot of experience driving before this thing happened. And like I said, I hate the fact that what happened in my heart just pours out to the family of the lost child. That's the worst thing you can think of as a parent, is that your child leaves before you. And my heart goes out. But this whole thing was a travesty. What happened to him is just, I don't know, a lot of not knowing what to do. And that shaped what he did. But as far as just plain malice, just with no care, that wasn't him. That wasn't him at all. And that wasn't the way that his family brought him up, and that wasn't the kid that I counseled in ministry and that, you know, that helped me in the church and did things that, you know, that other kids, I couldn't get other kids to do. And he was always like shelved. You know, when I say shelved, he always like to himself. He was never outspoken or hung with a crowd of kids or nothing. He stayed to himself all the time. Kind of shelved. It was just him and his brother. And one thing I could say, if I had to paint a picture of him, and I done dealt with a lot of rough kids, but he was nothing like that. He's just as kind and considerate as he can be. But like I said, I don't know what in the world, you know, what goes in kids' minds when they get in trouble. His thing was he had to find his mom. Like I said, that's all he had, really, his mom. And she sheltered them, and she kept them under her wing like a hen to her chicks. And whenever they got in trouble, they ran to their mom. And that was, I guess that's what was on his mind. I just, like I said, I hate what happened, and, you can't fix that. You can't, it's nothing, no bandage or nothing can heal that pain. But maybe, I don't know, maybe we can resolve something out of this and not take 2 lives out. So, I thank you for your time.
And raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you give down here.
Yes,
All right, let us know your name and then you answer.
my name is Janelle Holmes. First, I would like to apologize to the family. This has been heavy on our family as well because we understand the loss that they took, and we're so sorry. And we've been praying for their family. We've been wanting to reach out to them, but we understand that no contact order that was granted, so we had to obey that also. But we are truly sorry, and they are in our prayers, holidays, all the time. We pray for them because we understand the loss that they took. Because had it been the other way, we would feel the same that they were feeling. But what I want you to understand is Willis is not a bad kid. Every kid, we were going through the process of learning. And as the pastor said, Willis was sheltered. Their mother kept them together in the house. He didn't roam the streets and hang out with groups like some kids do. And this is heavy on my heart because when the idea came up about the purchasing of the car for Willis, me and his grandmother, and I debated with her about that because of the fact that he hadn't been driving, had enough experience on the roads. I didn't think he had enough experience to be driving, and me and her debated, and we went back and forth. And when I looked up, the car was and he didn't have enough experience driving. He hadn't been, like I said, he was a shelter kid. And he's very sorry about what he did. And we understand that he has to endure some consequences for his actions, which was leaving, but he panicked. And it wasn't like he panicked to run and hide and get away. His mother went and called and called the cops to come and get it. He wasn't hiding. He was scared. But again, I just want the family to know that we are very, very sorry, and we understand that the loss that was taken from them, and we're praying for them. And I can understand if they have some hardship, because if it was vice versa, we maybe have those too, but we're sorry, we're praying for them, and he's not a bad kid, and he hadn't had that much experience, and I know that doesn't cover, the accident, but it was an accident, and I just want to say again, we are so sorry.
Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm the testimony you give in the case now here, you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right, put your hand down, and if you'll let us know your name, and then you may proceed.
My name is Christy Coleman. To your honor and the courts. Good afternoon. My name is Christy Hogan, and I'm a social worker for a local nonprofit in town. Willis Trueblood Jr. is my oldest nephew. I am here today to speak on his character, as I can contest the following is all true.
To the family of Ms. Sims, we extend our sincere apologies to your family. There is not a day or a special occasion that we do not include your family in our prayers. Your lives changed forever that day, and we will all be forever connected. Pray for forgiveness and ask for grace as we continue to help support and navigate Willis during this time. In the past, our village and I have always taught our kids when something happens, always come tell your parents first. No matter what may be said outside of this court, Your Honor, I want to assure you that our family's shared principles are based on faith, love, kindness, and gratitude. These are the values that have been instilled in Willis since birth. Our family is not grand, it's very small. We cherish each moment that we have together. For those that know Willis know that his life is consumed with church, work, and school. Willis has always been a quiet and reserved child. Of his entire adolescence, I've noticed he is not a child that speaks many words. I want to have long, in-depth conversations. However, when he does talk, his words are meaningful and impactful. So when I was going through postpartum after delivering my twins, Willis came to me and said, Auntie Christy, I know you're tired. Let me watch the twins while you sleep for a couple of hours. That is the kind-hearted person he has always been. Always there to help my kids and his siblings to learn how to ride a bike or help with science fair projects. Willis and my twins, they're 4 years old, they share a unique bond. My son is quiet and reserved, and often I think Willis is the only person who truly understands him. They say a lot to each other, often without uttering a word. My oldest daughter adores Willis and looks forward to the advice that her cousin gives her on the weekend. We love and care deeply for Willis. To the Sims family, again, we are truly saddened by what occurred, and we will forever keep your family in our thoughts and prayers.
That's fine if you go from the first. And if you can let us know your name, the court reporter is going to want to make sure we have your name and then you may.
I don't want to my uncle picked me up and took me over there.
I didn't really know what was going on. And by the time we got there, we was getting there, called the police as well, and she told us what to do. And when we missed it getting over there, we found out more. We were digging a little bit further ahead to get there. It was just an accident. Willis was not aware that he had passed. He wasn't even aware that we had to go. He just thought it was as, it's something he was doing at some point. He overheard my mistake. He lost. He overheard my when we called and that lost it. Police officers, but when we called, told us exactly that we met the officers who were arrested. And I was trying to explain it, trying to do the right thing. And one of them was rushing. This has changed everybody's life. Their lives and ours. We have been seeing threats. I see it like in school. People have judged us. Who they know who is. We have to worry about what's going to happen. When you get out of the company, we have to work at it. You know, it has caused a lot of worry in this life. I don't know exactly where it happened. I don't know what's going on. I know he's gonna have to have something for what happened, but please counsel. He needs help. Nobody knows what he's going to do. I just pray for mercy. I'm asking for everyone to look outside of everyone else. Someone's really going through it. They're in a house. Other people really outside. They have to leave. I'm asking for you to help.
So I just have one other letter to read into the record. Now, Mr. Trueblood has been working at McDonald's. This is from his assistant manager. Her name is Andrea Ford. Willis is a really great worker. Out of all of my coworkers, he's the only person I can truly count on when I am in need of help and coming to work on time. No matter if he has to work, no matter if he has to walk to work, he's going to come into work. He works an average of 40 hours a week, comes into work sometimes at 4 a.m. to 3 p.m. when I need help, and all the other coworkers have called out on me. He knows how to control himself in this situation. Music is his key of self-control, and I learned that from working with him over the past year. The other letter I have, Judge, the last one on that, is from Mary Bryant, grandma of Willis Trueblood Jr. My name is Mary Bryant, and I'm the grandmother of Willis Trueblood Jr. I respectfully submit this letter to the court with humility and deep sorrow regarding the tragic loss of Elizabeth Ellie Sims. First and foremost, I wish to express my heartfelt condolences to Ellie's family and loved ones. There are no words that can ease the pain of losing a child, and I understand that their loss is profound and permanent. I am deeply sorry for their grief, and I keep them in my prayers. I have known Willis his entire life. He was raised in a loving and structured family environment with a strong church background, where he was taught respect, accountability, compassion, and the value of human life. Throughout his upbringing, Willis has always been a well-mannered, respectful, and courteous young man, known by family, church members, and those around him for his character and good conduct. Prior to this tragic incident, Willis had no serious criminal history, and had never been in trouble with the law. At the time of the accident, he was 18 years old, still very young. While nothing can excuse what happened, I believe his actions were the result of panic and fear, not cruelty or disregard for life. A young person faced with such a terrifying moment, he made a decision that he will regret for the rest of his life. Willis has expressed sincere remorse and sorrow for the loss of Ellie's life, understands the gravity of this tragedy and the pain it has caused. This event has deeply affected him and our entire family. By entering a no contest plea, he has accepted responsibility and prepared to face the consequences of his actions. I respectfully ask the court to consider Willis's youth at the time of the offense, his lack of any serious prior criminal record, his faith-based upbringing, and the strong family support that surrounds him. I believe that while accountability is necessary, mercy, counseling, and opportunity would allow him to mature, learn from this tragedy, and one day become a positive and productive member of society. Thank you, Judge Marsh, for your time and consideration. Respectfully submitted, Mary Bryant, grandmother of Willis Trueblood Jr. We also have a presentation, Judge, of pictures of Willis and his family. Judge, just to make sure I understand, the court will permit Willis to address the court again.
Again,
The court will allow Willis to address Your Honor after the state makes their argument on him. Is that what the court said?
no, you would do that during the evidence and that portion. Then the argument is just I'll allow you to have the last argument.
Mr. Trueblood is also ready to address the court.
Let's just make sure he has a microphone. In a number of cases, you cited downward departure. Downward departure, according to case law, is slightly different than the minimum mandatory in this case of 4 years. Are you asking for a departure from a mandatory minimum term pursuant to Florida statute 316.027G? And if so, what evidence supports that it would result in injustice?
Judge, the evidence that the defense's position is that youthful offender does allow the court to.
Understand youthful offender, but separately, or are you asking for departure outside of that, outside of youthful offender as to the mandatory minimum? Because if the court grants that outside of youthful offender, the court is required to state the basis, and the court may only grant it if it finds that a factor, consideration, or circumstance clearly demonstrates that imposing a mandatory minimum term would constitute or result in an injustice. I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but I need that to be addressed.
Yes, Judge. The defense's position wholeheartedly is that 4 years of imprisonment for this case would be an injustice. This is nothing that he has ever done before. This is nothing that he intended to do. And Judge, the punishment here, while we all acknowledge and recognize the gravity of loss, the punishment is for leaving. So when we look at in the scope of what the court has heard as far as leaving, Judge, we're talking within an hour, his family is reaching out to law enforcement. He is surrendering himself to them, and he is acknowledging within 2 hours everything that he did in this case. So yes, Judge, respectfully, we do believe that would be an injustice.
All right, with that, the court will be in recess for approximately 20 minutes. back in Leon County Case 2024 CF 1235, State versus Trueblood. At a previous session of this court, the defendant entered a plea of no contest to the sole count of the amended information, one count of pleading to see crash involving death. The court accepted that plea and set the matter for sentencing, which we have held here today. In this case, the court has heard about Ellie Sims, loud voice that was silenced. The court heard about Willis Trueblood, quiet voice screaming out for mercy. No sentence will fill the hole left in this family for Alpha Chi Omega sisters, Florida State University, or the Tallahassee community. But no sentence is needed to correct some awful or evil intent, because that's not what we have. The court's got to decide an appropriate punishment, one that deals with general deterrence, one that fits this offender. The court heard about Ellie, full of life, and doing it the right way, coming home from the library in a crosswalk, having pushed the button, and the lights were flashing. Something all of our Florida State University students should feel safe being able to cross the street. We heard about the hurt of her younger brother answering the door to law enforcement officers. The anguish of a mother not being able to accept the loss of her child. We heard from her father and the loss he feels, and the sister that dreads her own wedding. But we also heard from the Trueblood family, their sincere remorse, the fact that they flagged down law enforcement and the defendant turns over them. So in fashioning the sentence, the court's required to look at the statutory downward departures requested by the defense. The first, youthful offender, the defendant does qualify, being 18 at the time of crime and now prior to sentencing. The court finds a downward departure under that basis not be appropriate and exercises discretion not to sentence as a youthful. Next is the specialized treatment for a mental disorder. The defendant does qualify based on Defense Exhibit 1. This is not one of those cases where, based on that, this court should downward depart. And finally, that this crime was committed in an unsophisticated way, in an isolated fashion, and that the defendant has shown remorse. Definitely an unsophisticated crime. There's no indication of any cover-up, any hiding evidence. The young man who drove away asked for his number. The court legally finds this to be isolated. The court will note the defendant was on probation with DJJ, but under the law of Florida and the case law that controls, that is not a definition of it just per se being not isolated. The case law supports that this one crime, followed by the one we're here for today, does qualify the defendant for this to be an isolated crime. And finally, remorse. This one was closer, folks. The first two were easy, this one was hard. But what we heard from, I intently watched the defendant during the entirety of this proceeding to see what his reactions are. Not just to what he's facing, but to whom he's facing. But the court had to ask that question. You heard me ask it of the officer because you see the defendant wiping his eyes or doing something during that interrogation. He said he did see tears. For that, I do find the defendant to be remorseful, and he does qualify for a downward departure. State in this case has asked for the lowest permissible sentence, which is not, and the state pointed out, not the recommended sentence. The origin of the law in this regard with the legislature is the legislature first had recommended sentences, and it was a upward departure or a downward departure. They got rid of the requirement of upward departure. They kept the lower limit, which is what results as our lowest permissible sentence. State has asked for that lowest permissible sentence that we previously discussed as 129.450 months. Defense has asked for less than 4 years, 4 years being the mandatory minimum requirement of the statute. In fashioning the appropriate sentence, this court has to balance the needs of society, traffic safety at FSU and other general deterrence with the needs of this defendant. And so ultimately, the court sentences the defendant as follows. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm required to read all the court costs and fees and their statutory bases, so I'm going to do that first. Trueblood, this court adjudicates you guilty of count 1 and sentences you as follows. The $2,100 fine pursuant to Florida Statute 775.083. $105 surcharge pursuant to 938.04. $20 court cost pursuant to 938.06 Crime Stopper Trust Fund. $3 court cost pursuant to 938.011 Criminal Justice Trust Fund. $50 pursuant to 938.03 Crimes Compensation Trust Fund. $225 pursuant to 938.05 Local Government Criminal Justice Trust Fund. $2 court cost pursuant to 938.15 City Criminal Justice Education, City Code, Section 1-8. $50 court cost pursuant to 775.0832 County Crime Prevention. $65 court cost pursuant to 939.185 County Additional Court Cost, County Code 7-24. $3 court cost pursuant to 938.19 Teen Court Assessment, Leon County Code 7-28. $50 public defender application fee pursuant to 27.521B. $100 cost of prosecution pursuant to 938.278. And $100 legal assistance lien pursuant to 938.291. Although this sentence will not satisfy anyone, the sentence of this court is as follows. The defendant shall be sentenced to 8 years in the Florida Department of Corrections with a 4-year mandatory minimum. You will have a 3-year driver's license revocation, and you shall pay restitution to the victims, the amount to be reserved in 90 days. So you have the right to, the defendant will receive 1 day for credit that he has served. You have the right to appeal the jurisdiction of this court and the legality of its sentence within 30 days from today's date. If you cannot afford an attorney for that appeal, I can appoint one to represent you. For that, the defendant will be remanded into the custody of the Florida Department, of the Leon County Sheriff for transmission to the Florida Department of Corrections. For that,
Now that you've heard the evidence presented to Judge Marsh, what do you think about the sentence? Was it fair? If you were the judge, what sentence would you have imposed? And finally, may Ellie Sims rest in peace. My name is Maya with Deep Dive True Crime and Mentor Lawyer Justice Network, and thank you for making it to the end of this video.